Hi, my name is Simon Headley, known to my clients and partners as a strategic alchemist and an ultimate connector. I'm a chartered accountant who brings together and bridges the worlds of business philosophy, finance, marketing, optimization, ontology, and so much more. Always focused on one thing, the simple idea that can make the difference to people and projects so we can tip the scales in their favor and get them complete. Pause, Stop, Reset is all about the three little words that can make the difference. They have for me and my clients, and I hope they will for you too. During the show, you'll get to learn about my guests' real-life experiences and the insights and lessons they've learned as they've navigated the resets in their personal and business lives, which you'll be able to leverage yourself. So let's start the show. Hello, I'm Simon Headley, and welcome to today's episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. Today, I'm joined by Simon Coulson. I've known him for over a decade and watched him do incredible things time and time again, or remaining somebody really humble and awesome I can call up and talk to like we're doing today. He's built successful training companies, published books, built businesses, spoken on stages, done property deals, and even recorded albums that people love, and probably that's just touching the surface of who he is and what he's been up to. I can't wait to hear what he has to share with us today. Simon, welcome to the show.
Hello, Simon. How you doing?
It's kind of fun being a Simon and Simon show, right?
Simon squared, yeah.
Exactly. Simon X, as we say. So look, for people who haven't come across you before, haven't kept up with your recent resets, who are you and what are you focused on today?
Wow, okay. Well, it's kind of complicated, but in a nutshell, I'll try and be brief. So I'm Simon Coulson. I started an online business way back in 2004, became a self-made millionaire from that, and then branched out into setting up a training company to teach other people how to do what I'd managed to do. Run that training company in internet marketing business space for over a decade. And then along the way, I've kind of got distracted by various other businesses too. So I set up a music training academy. I've done property development and bought the farm that was used in the TV show The Darling Buds of May and developed that as a holiday and wedding venue. I've set up self-storage centres, and more recently I've had another bit of a reset and actually started recording music and launched two original albums and lots of other singles as well. So in a short potted history, I guess that kind of covers it.
What's your current focus, Simon?
My current focus is pretty much the music. I'm kind of stepped back from the other businesses. They've got managers that run them, so I'm still sort of at the helm of several fairly big businesses, but more in a sort of non-exec director kind of role where it's a sort of monthly board meeting type capacity, and day to day, I'm pretty much just making noises.
Love it. And that's one of the things, if you get a sense of Simon, he's been not just talking about this stuff, but building him for himself. And I've watched people talk about it over decades, as you know, Simon, but you're actually living the story, not sort of the preaching, selling it bit. And just so they're listening in, the album's called, you're working under Simon, is that right? But with two eyes?
Yes. So I needed a unique artist name for the music stuff. And it was, although there weren't any musical artists called Simon Coulson, it was a bit boring sounding. So I thought I needed a cooler musical name. So I plumped for Simon with two eyes. So Siimon.
Lovely. And we'll share that all in the portal for you guys. Now, look, I've known you a little bit and know some of your stories, but if we look back over your life till now, what have been the biggest shifts and resets you've been through?
Sure. Well, I think the big one is how it all started, which is I've been working for BT for 14 years, straight out of school, left school at 18, went to work up in the city. And one day I had a bit of an incident at King's Cross Station. I remember getting on the escalator at the end of the day and I was a bit tired. So rather than walking up the escalator, I was just standing. And I remember getting on the escalator and just standing there. And the next thing I remember is waking up, lying on the floor with what felt like hundreds of people just stepping over me. I guess they thought I was drunk or something. And eventually somebody was kind enough to kind of stop and stoop down and said, "You all right, mate?" And I just remember I just about managed to go, "No," but I didn't know why I wasn't all right. I didn't know what the hell I was doing there. I didn't know what had happened. And I'm kind of, as I was coming to, I was thinking, have I had a stroke? Was I mugged? Did I slip? Have I had a heart attack? Didn't know what was going on. So they got the staff and they called me an ambulance and they put heart monitors and things on me. we're scratching their heads a bit, to be honest, to try and work out what's happened to this guy. Why was he suddenly collapsed on the floor? Because his heart seems all right. He doesn't seem to have had a heart attack. He doesn't seem to have had a stroke. And they started asking me a few questions. I did my blood sugars, and that was all right. So it wasn't like a diabetic collapse. And they started chatting to me and said, tell us about your work. What do you do? What's your lifestyle like? And I said, well, I work, and then I'm just on my way home. I sort of get on a train at 7:30 every morning and work 8-9 hours a day. Then I travel home. So it's a 2-hour commute each way, door to door, to get to work. So I'm spending 4 hours a day commuting. And I've been doing a fair bit of overtime recently. So I've actually been working every Saturday as well. In fact, I've been doing every Saturday for about 4 or 5 months now. And straight away, they just said, well, that's it then. It's called exhaustion. You've just collapsed from exhaustion. And at this point, I was 32 years old. And that was a big turning point for me because I thought, blimey, if I'm burnt out at 32 and I've managed 14 years, I've got another 35 years to go till I hit retirement age. That tells me something's got to change, and I can't really carry on doing what I'm doing right now for another 35 years because the body's collapsing on me after being age 32. So that was the big turning point, and it was that event coupled with BT shortly afterwards announcing a voluntary redundancy scheme, and it just kind of felt like everything was lining up. And the other thing that happened was I always played in bands for a bit of fun, kind of pub bands, wedding bands, that kind of thing. But around this time as well, we had decided to change our bands to be a Coldplay tribute band, thinking that we'd get gigs further afield and better paid gigs. And that was kind of working. And we were actually getting offered, gigs every week with that. So it was like the perfect storm of a life-changing event, making you really reevaluate your life and your working pattern, the offer of a little bit of a lump sum if you walked away from it, and a plan B waiting in the wings, which was to be a musician doing the Coldplay tribute band.
Very clear. And it explains a lot, I think. It's sometimes those physical resets, that reality of waking up going, how did I get here? It does put a lot of things in perspectives, right? It isn't sort of business as normal after that, where it shouldn't be for many of us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Lovely. And there's much more to you that you've been through, and we'll cover that, I'm sure, as we get on in the show. And I'm always curious of these three aspects, and that's what I've been sort of talking about a lot lately, this pausing, stopping, and resetting. Which has been the hardest for you, and why do you think that is?
You know what? I guess partly the stopping was the hardest thing because I thought about leaving that job before, but I'd never actually left. And I'd actually handed in my notice twice before to this corporate job, and they'd pulled me back in. The first time was when I'd been there a couple of years, and I kind of realised that I could earn more money elsewhere, and actually got an offer of a local job in Kent, in fact, not far from where you are now, Simon, in Tunbridge Wells. And I kind of like tendered my resignation, and they said, well, what if we gave you another $5,000? And I was like, well,
$5,000, I'll do it, he says.
Yeah, well, I was staying, yeah. So basically that was what they did. They just reeled me back in with like the offer of advancement to the next grade straight away, which then made that offer about $3,000. Yeah, I think at the time the alternative job offer was like local, and it was $2,000 a year more, so it was a no-brainer to take it. But then they swung the balance the other way by saying, well, we'll give you $5,000 more to stay. So suddenly the BT option was $3,000 more, albeit central London not as local, but it's $3,000 more. So it's like, okay. And that's the devil, that's the job that and you're comfortable, and your work colleagues, where it's always a risk jumping out. So I guess being brave enough to leave was, took that collapsing at King's Cross Station, because then a few years later, I actually got offered another job, and that was on more money. And again, same thing happened. I resigned and said, I know last time, I did this a number of years ago, you just offered me a bit more, but this new job is on so much more money that you won't be able to compete. And I got a phone call at 10 o'clock that evening saying that they'd got approval from HR.
And we're going to compete.
I've got an £18,000 pay rise overnight.
Wow.
It's like, wow, okay.
And
and that just drew me in again, because the other job was traveling, whereas this job was, in a fixed location. So it's like, okay, So now staying in the comfort is more money than the other one without having to, travel around. So I'll just stay put again. So I guess it took the third attempt for me to finally break free from the corporate shackles.
And it's funny, given I've seen you and others on stages making, let's sort of just drop some numbers a little bit. On your best day when you were selling from stage, you made 50K, 100K, more than that? What's been your best sort of selling from stage in a few hours talking?
The highest sales I did in a day was just over £500,000.
And I sort of drew that out for a reason, because I don't know about you, when I was 18, Simon, and my first job in London earning 18 grand a year, the idea of earning 100 grand in a day was just insanity. It is silly for many people, right? And you've made a lot more than I have and done really cool things. It's interesting when you talk about, like, they kept you in the job for an extra 5 grand. And that is where you're at in life can really alter, I think, with that money aspect. Is that true for you?
Absolutely, yeah. At the time, that you didn't know any better. So 5 grand was a lot. That was like, wow, £5,000. Now, it sounds terrible to say it, but it almost feels like pocket change, because when you run your own businesses and you can see how much money you can make doing different things, and what's possible in different businesses, that's a pretty small amount of money. That's a tiny fraction of a percent of turnover of the businesses that I run today. So it's just a different reference point, I guess, now.
Yeah, I wanted to draw that out because, this isn't a Simon promotion show, but if you're looking to make money online, Simon has courses and freebies about this stuff. We'll share that later on with you. But there are people I know that struggle to earn £5 a day, £5 an hour. And we're in a world today where there are also kids that are making millions of pounds watching other people watch streams, right? There are people doing strange things from my perspective, making a fortune, and NFTs and crypto. And it's a really interesting time to reset that financial brain, which I personally find the hardest. I can be smart, but to really step into it and go, what do you mean they go speak on stages and make money? That's a crazy thing to do. That isn't how life works.
Yeah. And I think it's just, it continues to just get stranger and stranger. And the pace of which things are changing is just accelerated. I think, in my parents' day, and the reason I worked for BT was I was brainwashed into what you do is you go and get a job with a big established company. The bigger, the better, because that means a job for life. Basically, the smaller the company life, you went, the more risky it was. Yeah. So I was did exactly what I was conditioned by parents to do, was go and work for BT, which at the time was the second biggest employer in the UK. Because that meant certainty, that meant security, that meant a job for life. And that meant you were just going to be another, wage slave, but you were going to live the sensible life, as you're going to have, 2.6 kids and, or 2.3 or whatever it is now, probably 1.7 or something. That was, what you brought up. And I guess in fairness to the parents in their generation, they were passing on that lesson of certainty and safety and security, because they'd maybe seen people of their generation, not go down a steady path, and had seen in their generation maybe the most successful people were the people that got the good job, worked for the big company and worked from all their life till retirement. But today, of course, we've seen the advent of the internet and a completely different world where, as you say, kids at 21 can become multimillionaires or even younger than that, doing something they love doing, and then have the whole of their life free to do whatever the hell they want to do, which just wasn't an option in our parents' generation.
And that certainty thing you drew up is one of the big subs we talk about, because the whole reason for Pause Stop Reset isn't just heavy stuff or good stuff. It's the fact that life can be really seemingly certain and then go sideways when you least expect it. The financial bit is definitely one of them. Somebody that you and I haven't spoken about yet, but a mutual friend, he had a giant property portfolio and had to file for bankruptcy out of one bad relationship. And these things happen and we don't know what to do with it in that moment. And sort of leads us on to the next question, Simon, which is, what are the most important lessons you wish you could give that younger you?
Well, good question. So I think probably if I was, and I do get parents and youngsters and teenagers that come on my training courses now, and one big advice I give to them is don't go to university, get out there in the real world. Partly because university, I think, is just de-skills you in, currently, I actually took on a graduate a few years ago who joined me as a first job, 21, 22 years old, and she had £50,000 worth of debt, which was, quite scary. And I took someone on to do the same role who was 18 with zero debt. So like, who was the winner in that situation? She had got, wasted 3 years of zero earning, racked up 50 grand of debt, and ended up in exactly the same job as someone that hadn't done that. And I think, with the pace of the world these days, already universities have started reducing some of their 3-year courses to 2 years and 4 years to 3. Because think about it, what you learn in year 1 of university, particularly if it's anything to do with tech, online or whatever, is literally out of date by the time you get your first job. 3 years later, that stuff's old hat now. That isn't how things are done. So I think university will de-skill you. Another bit of advice, I think, would be to work for a smaller company. And I think the sweet spot is more of a sort of a medium-sized company, shall I say? Because I think in a big company, you're just such a small cog in a big wheel. It's hard to make a difference. It's hard to stand out. And it's actually frustrating because you get constrained. I remember working for BT, I had this ridiculous situation where the mouse on my computer stopped working. But in order to get a new one, I had to get 3 managers to sign the requisition form for a new
$20 mouse, right? For £20
which is just like, a 20 quid item or whatever. But 3 people had to sign a piece of paper, which had to go around the company. It took nearly 2 weeks to get this new mouse approved, in which during that time, I couldn't actually use my computer because the mouse would stop working. And that sort of nonsense that you get in big companies that are, not agile and have all these procedures in place, I found really frustrating. Whereas I think if you go the other way, if you go and work with a one-man band, well, you're probably never going to grow and achieve much, because that one-man band business might only ever want to be a one-man band business. So I think a sort of small and medium-sized company is a great place to go, because you get a bigger portfolio of skills. You're going to learn more stuff because you have to do more stuff, because it's not like a big corporate where, there was all this culture of, oh, that's not my department. Yeah, we know what that needs doing, but that's not us. That's this department over there. Whereas in a smaller company, you just crack on and do it. And running my own businesses, I've learned, you need to be, you need to be willing to turn your hand to everything in business. When I started, I joke about this, but I was the customer services department. If people phoned up with a query about an order, it was me. I was the graphics design department, because I was designing the CD booklets that were going in with the CD-ROMs and DVDs that I was selling. I was the technical department, because I had to learn how to author DVDs and put menus on DVDs. I was tech support. If somebody had a problem that didn't work and, they're getting some weird error message coming out of Windows or something, I had to fix that as well. I was the production department. I had to learn how to burn and create DVDs and CDs. I was the dispatch department. It was me, doing
you name it, you were doing it.
I was doing it all, literally everything in the business. And I think that's great. And I think that's one of the good skills that you get running your own business, is that how everything works, and you can make sure things are done efficiently because you've done them all yourself. And then if someone's got a problem later on, a better way around the problem anyway, because you did it yourself at one point.
And if we look at business itself, were you an entrepreneurial kid? Like, did you have that business insights? Is there any sort of Alan Sugar-like business ideas you'd pass on?
It's funny. I think it was a bit ingrained in me. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. I think one reason was my dad actually was an accountant. He was a self-employed accountant. But we were always broke as a family. We literally had the bailiffs knocking the door when I was a kid, because he never progressed from having those very newest, smallest companies as his clients. And what used to happen with those companies, the stat about how many businesses go out of business within the first 3 years, 5 years, like 80% of them or something. And they were his clients. And he'd be the accountant that would do their books at the end of the year and tell them, you're insolvent or you've made a loss. And then he'd hand them an invoice for his bill. And of course, they wouldn't pay. They'd just shut down the business. So I sort of grew up partly thinking, well, why do all these businesses fail? Partly, why are we as a family always broke? Because my dad supposedly is an accountant and he's a skilled person. And why are we so poor? Because isn't that what you're supposed to do, is get a skill? But also partly, I used to work help out doing some of the bookkeeping in my teenage years. And that got me looking at the accounts. And for example, my dad had 2 clients that were taxi firms, and both of them had 4 cars. And one business made £120,000 profit, and one made a £50,000 loss. And I used to play spot the difference with the 2 sets of accounts and say, well, on paper, these are the same business. It's a taxi firm with 4 cars. Why is this one made a thumping great profit and this one's losing money? And you start looking, okay, what's the difference? What do they spend on wages per hour? What do they spend on maintenance? What do they spend on the cars? How many miles are they putting on each of their cars? And you try to really, I found it fascinating trying to understand business from kind of like the inside out. And that gave me a little bit of an appetite for it, I think. But all the time the pressure was go and get a job, work with a big company. But even when I started at BT, I used to actually have various little sidelines that I would do at the weekend. So I remember when I was 18, 19, I was buying pallets of catalogue returns from like the likes of Kay's catalogue. If you're old enough to remember that. And you could buy a pallet load of like electrical items that had been returned by customers for 11% of the retail value. Now, some of those items were returned because they didn't work. They were broken. So they're maybe next to worthless.
That's nothing, or an art exhibit nowadays, but nothing.
But some of them might have been returned because the customer didn't like the colour, or some of them might have been returned because they had a little mark on them or a little scratch or something. And basically, I would spend my weekends in my garage going through these items, and it was like lucky dip. You'd open a pallet of stuff and it'd be like, what have we got here? We've got 3 toasters, but one of them's been dropped so that the case is cracked. One of them's dead, doesn't fire up at all. And one of them works. So actually out of this, we can definitely make a good one. We've got all the parts we need. If we can take the mechanism that heats up out of the one with a smashed case and put that in the one that has got a good case but doesn't power up, I've got one good toaster that I can sell. So I was doing stuff like that at the weekends and selling them at boot fairs as a little bit of a sideline, just because I guess I just love the idea of business and a bit of a wheeler dealer. I grew up with only fools and horses as well. So I used to love, Del Boy and the whole Alan Sugar Amstrad generation and seeing people that had kind of come from being market traders, making a bit of money too. And guess I had that in me a little bit too.
Love it. No, I love it. And I love doing these shows. I didn't know that about you, Simon. It's getting into the juicy stuff. I can just picture you like in the garage, and nowadays people breaking up the toasters and going, I've got one, it fits. And ironically, it's a business happening today, right? People are buying, how do you say it? These truckloads of Amazon returns, doing that exactly same business today in a whole different way. With Absolutely. The joy of eBay and Gumtree and carrying other people to flipping stuff at garage boot sales. Yeah. But let's touch a bit of a different side for a second, which I like to relax watching books and movies, and sometimes they give me some inspiration. You mentioned Del Boy and the old Only Fools and Horses, which again, I'm sure has shaped me more than I realized looking back at it. What books or movies have most helped you and why?
You know what? I think when I used to travel to London, one of the great things I did with hindsight, it was brilliant training. I didn't realize I was doing it. Was I used to read books on the train because I was kind of on the train for 2 hours twice a day. So I'd always, be chugging through a book. I'd do a couple of books a week. And most of the books that I read, or a lot of the ones I read, were actually biographies of successful people. And probably by osmosis, by just reading the book, I was learning a hell of a lot about business and being successful without even realizing it was an education. I was sort of reading them just because I thought it was interesting, hearing the backstory on people. But actually, I think that was a brilliant education. So, was reading the books by the dragons from Dragon's Den and, successful. I remember.
We even have dragons back then, so I'm not trying to think it sort of.
Yeah, I think it was the early days, right? Certainly people like, there was the guy that did, oh God, what was his name? He's the former head of ICI who did a TV series sorting out failed businesses. Was it Sir John Harvey Jones, I think was his name?
Yeah, Sir John Harvey Jones, yeah.
Yeah, that's him. So, I remember reading his book and, he was going into businesses and all sorts of different businesses and working out what was wrong with them and fixing them and stuff like that. I just found really, inspirational, but really interesting as well, just to see how he thought about things and how he could take his thinking and apply it into business. So, I've found that a great education. And probably just when I was starting my business, there was a book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Yeah,
and it was almost like I was living that. I was so doing the kind of things that he was talking about in that book. So that was almost a bit life affirming that I'm doing the right thing. And look, he is someone that's a bit further down the road than me and is doing fantastic things. So I'm just.
Have you met Tim yet?
I haven't. No.
He's on our list of people we want to get on the show, and it's ironic. I think we have mutual friends that know him. You and I haven't had that dot connect yet. And he's definitely actually, now you're saying that, I can see the synergies, because the same way he does different things, you've also done the music and the businesses and that mindset. What was your degree, Simon? Did you go to university for degrees? I hear like mechanic and you in sciencey.
Yeah, so no, I left school at 18. I went straight into working at BT, but I've done the Roger Hamilton Wealth Dynamics entrepreneurial profiling thing. And in that, I come out as a mechanic, as a systemizer. And I think at school, I was kind of good at maths and good at physics. So I was definitely kind of a sort of engineering-y processes sort of person.
Find a way, make it work. And
yeah, that's it. I think I wrote about this in my book, actually, but there was a boss I used to have at BT, and at the time I absolutely hated him because I used to ask him a question about something, to do with some technical aspect of what we're doing at BT. And I knew that he knew the answer and he could just tell me the answer. And his standard answer was RTFM, which is read the flipping manual or the something else manual.
Yes,
but basically, he taught me, though, to be self-sufficient and go and find a solution to any problem. So I then had to trawl through. And literally, we had a whole floor full of manuals, like A4 ring binders, floor to ceiling, for every kind of telephone exchange and all the different equipment that we had. And I might sometimes go in there and spend 3 hours looking for the right blooming bit of page of the right manual that spoke about a particular issue. But what that did was that made me really self-sufficient. And when I started my own business, it was like, I don't know how to do anything. No problem. I'll just find out how to do it. It completely unfazed me then that there wasn't anyone to ask when I got stuck, because I was so in the mindset that I can find out how to do anything. There's nothing you can ask me to do that I can't figure out how to do.
Really valuable lesson, and one that's often hard when things haven't been so hard on the way up often, right? Especially in entrepreneurship where things are changing. We're going to have to move forward a little bit again. And I know you've been through different resets in your personal and business life. I'm curious what's helped you navigate them. Because obviously there's your internal stuff, but what do you draw on? What gives you strength to navigate your resets?
Sure. I guess in some ways, a lot of things come back to it's probably the accountancy and the numbers. But when I've started businesses, I'll give you an example. I bought the farm where they filmed the TV show, The Darling Buds of May, and I kind of refurbished it, ran it as a holiday venue and a wedding venue. And then after sort of getting to a certain point, that everything was done, it's all open. When you look at the annual figures, it's like, hold on a minute, I've got, 3 million quid tied up in this asset, but it's just not yielding enough. I could literally sell it all up, stick the money in flats, buy-to-lets, and make twice as much money without all the stress of, organising and being responsible for, 20 weddings a year and hundreds of people's holidays. So that reset of, okay, this was fun, but this as a business isn't the best use of my time or the capital that's employed in it, was sort of easy. It was very much a number-based reset. So it's kind of interesting. There's been different reasons for reset. So there was the event at King's Cross Station. It was the reset of getting out of corporate life. There was businesses like that sometimes you just come to the realization that you do the numbers and that needs a reset. And I think more recently, the music side of things was actually COVID. And it was a really good, my best friend, probably Rick, who's the drummer in the band, got COVID really bad in January of last year. And my brother also got it bad. And both of them were hospitalized. And you suddenly start thinking about life in a different way and thinking, well, what if that was me? And what if I was the one that, you're not sure if they're going to make it or not? what would I have done differently? And for me, it was kind of like that was the turning point to turn back to music and go, well, you know what? Music's always been my sort of first love. Ironically, that's why I sort of left BT, because I thought I was going to make it as a musician, and the internet businesses and things kind of happened by accident. So before it's too late, let's just say, you know what, you've made your money. Let's just go and do the music stuff you always wanted to do. Let's go and record an album and, get on that journey, get on that bus.
And if it's been a hard day and you're in one of your cars or at home, what's the album that you put on? Is it Coldplay, or is that too much work now with the...
You know what? Probably my favourite album is by a band called Deacon Blue, called Raintown, which was their first album, Scottish band. I think probably about 88, 89 it came out. And it's those kind of formative years when I was about 17, 18. And it's just my sort of go-to album, really. I think it's musically, it's a brilliant bit of work. There's the songs, a lot of heart in there, and just relaxes me, chills me out. That's probably my favourite album.
I would say some of your songs, we've talked about it, they are quite emotional. So check out Simon's album called Simon on the App Store and other places like that. And Simon, some people listening into the show, obviously they're looking to reset, so might be open to resetting into what's possible. What's your biggest suggestions for them?
You know, I think the biggest thing is you won't know unless you give it a try. So, I see so many people, and I was one of them. I was scared of doing something different because, I was in a safe place. And it's like, to get out of that comfort zone, sometimes you've got to stretch yourself. You've got to take a risk. But if you live your whole life never taking the risk and never getting out of the comfort zone, you're never going to know what if. So much better to have given it a go. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least you'll know you tried it and it didn't work out. Than living a life just always wondering what if. And if you are going to give it a go, the other thing I'd say is give it 100%. Of all the people that I've met that have been massively successful, the thing in common with all of us is we have given it 100%. Like Rick's one of my most successful students. He's done over 10 million now, and he's absolutely like me. When you've got to work hard, you work hard. If it means working into the evening, it works into the evening. And I love a quote from Theo Perfitti's biography when he's being interviewed. And one of the audience pipes up and says, I've read your story. And if you're so successful, why is it that you talk about having to work all through the night till dawn the next day? And he just looked at him and said, that's why I'm so successful. And I thought that answer just sums it up. But that's the mindset you've got to get. And sometimes, I see this with people that do training courses, and sometimes you get the people that are always looking for the problem. Like, you're teaching them something and go, but what if? What if nobody wants to buy this? What if Facebook closes my account? What if nobody likes my videos? What if, and if your mindset is so negative, you're always looking for the problem in everything, it's probably never going to happen. Right. In fact, when people, are thinking about booking a course and they're actually in advance and they're going, but what's the refund policy? I straight away know that if their mindset is already like looking like they want to cancel it and they don't want to do it anyway, and of course it's not going to work. It reminds me of my favorite quote, which is Henry Ford. And he says, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And I think that just sums up, like if you think you can do it, you've got to 100% believe in yourself, and you've got to give it maximum commitment, else it's not going to happen. Don't be half-assed about something. Don't just think, I might have a go at start my business, but I'm not going to work beyond 5 o'clock every day, and I'm still going to go to the pub on Friday and Saturday nights, and I'm definitely not doing anything on Saturday or Sunday because that's the weekend. You watch all those, read the books of some successful people, and they put all their blood, sweat, and tears into it when they're starting. They work dawn till dusk, long hours, and I did too. It wasn't an instant success, but it's there for the taking. If you're prepared to put in that extra effort, the rewards are there to be had.
Beautifully said. And it's a good reminder. That's a lot of what we're talking about with pause, stop, reset. Like if it really isn't working for you, we'll find something else that does and play full out on that. And it is okay to have some downtime. It is okay to listen to a podcast, but you're sort of investing in yourself to get you where you want to get to, wherever that may be. And I think you've touched on some of the takeaways there, Simon. I'm just curious if there is like one specific takeaway you'd love our guests to have.
I mean, for me, I think it's that really. I think it's just, you've just got to play full out. I think that's how I'd summarize it. My most successful people that I've taught have played full out, and that sums it up, really.
Love it. And are there any other guests that you can think of that you'd love to hear what they would be saying to these kind of things?
Good question. I don't know. Have you had Dan Priestley on?
I have not had Daniel Priestley on yet, and that would be kind of a fun guest. Dan's an interesting character, as you know, who's been through his own stuff. Other people do the same. So Dan would be a great guest. He's sort of on our list of friends, if that makes sense. So yeah, he'd be great.
Yeah, I think he'll be fab. Rob Moore. You ever had Rob Moore on?
I have not. No, you see, this podcast has been not kept away from that crowd of people, but we haven't sort of gone there yet. So no, Rob and Dan are very much people I've been building up to interviewing, if that makes sense, because I want to make sure they sort of, I don't know, they'd be really fun. So Rob and Dan, if you're listening in, let's get you on the show, and maybe even get Simon to interview. Maybe Simon C, not Simon S. Anyway, it's all good. And I love that. No, those guys have also, you must have known Dan and Rob for over a decade, right? So you've watched them build up their platforms, their careers.
So Rob spoke at one of the first ever events that I think my first ever speaking gig, Rob was speaking at as well. It wasn't my first, it was my second. So he was very green, just started, progressive property, and I've seen him grow that to a kind of 20 million a year property and training organisation. So it's been really interesting to sort of watch him grow, and he's a fair few years younger than me. So he's still in the what I call the empire building growth phase. And now I'm a little bit older. I'm like, okay, I'm happy now. I've made my lot. I don't need to be, going
life quality, right? You're going to work hard, but on the fun stuff like the music making, other stuff.
Exactly.
And Rob's been playing big on Clubhouse and podcasting, and you do look like, I don't know, 3-day nonstop talks. It's like, that's great. And that's choose your mentor. There are definitely different routes through life you can choose, right? That's the thing.
Absolutely,
and what about Dan? When did you first come across Daniel?
Yeah, similar time. Probably a year or two later, when I started speaking at events and spoke at some events that he was involved in when he was running those kind of multi-speaker events. And I think that's where I came across people like Roger Hamilton and Dr. DeMartini and some of those people. And, always loved his, Dan is someone who's just got great business mind, but also great ethics as well. He just always does the right thing. Not so much, he's like an entrepreneur, but he's not just driven by the money. He's also driven by kind of doing the right thing as well, which is sometimes a bit rare in business. So
I love that soundbite. As Simon said on the show, right? No, it's true. And I've watched Dan do everything from promoting actually John F. DeMartini and others back when he first came to the UK, building up one business, then going into the publishing, the structuring stuff, and now the accelerator group they're working on. And it is funny how these dots connect sometimes. If you're listening in going, how do I get started? Well, start somewhere. As Simon says, playful out. And I trust me that you're never really sure. Let's try that again. Delete that bit. And trust me, you're never quite sure whether the dots open up to over time. And it is the long run, I think, that's most important. Now, Simon, for people listening to you today, I'm sure some will want to connect with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. So on a personal capacity, simoncoulson.com, or check out my book on Amazon, which is called Interpreneur. I thought it's been really clever. Internet merged with the word entrepreneur, made Interpreneur. And
I always thought it was like the guy in the business. I didn't realize it was internet entrepreneur.
Yeah,
that's how stupid I am sometimes.
To be, but people can't spell it anyway. So, but anyway, type my name into Amazon, you'll probably find it. To simoncoulson.com and internetbusinessschool.com is the training company. And for the music stuff, Siimon.com with 2 I's. So SIIMON.com.
I love it. Well, look, Simon, it's been great having you on the show today. The reminders to really playful out in life, to give it a go, and also learning more about you that I've known for ages, but some of those little dots hadn't been connected till today. I really appreciate your time. And I want to, that said, I'm going to wrap up in just a minute. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with, Simon, before we wrap up the show?
You know what? I think just, if you're thinking about doing something different, I say just bloody do it. It's the thing I said earlier about you don't know until you give it a try. And sometimes there can be those people around you trying to hold you back and go, oh yeah, but what if? The naysayers, the negative people. And that can often be enough to make you, put on hold something that, you never wanted, or you've always wanted to, but you never actually got to do. So let go of some of that negativity and be your own person and make your own decisions, I think. And, I sometimes look back, I'm doing the music now, but, I was 50 last year. So I feel like a pensioner for the music industry. And I sometimes wonder, what if I'd started doing music when I was, in my early 20s and doing original music. And I wasn't so brainwashed into go and get a job, work for a big company. That's what you do. You don't forget the music industry. There almost might have been a whole different career, and who knows if it would have been a better life or not. I'll never know. All I can do is, do what I'm doing now, make the music, and it's going well for an old person. I think if you're particularly if you're younger, but if you're just thinking about doing something different, I'd say just get on and do it. Just make that leap.
I love it. Thank you, Simon. And a decade from now, I think you'll just be starting on the music career, and opportunities for music, entertainment, education, and business around the world are growing fast than anybody ever realizes. So I think the next decade is going to be really quite some fun. That's why it's important for us to pause, stop, reset, as we're going to do right now. So before we wrap up the show, head to Apple Podcasts, make sure you subscribe, give us 5 stars, and share what you heard Simon share on today. You can take some action on. You'll find more resource information at pause.reset.com/podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye for now. Once again, I'm Simon Headley. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset, which is brought to you by the team at simonx.com and published by thesimpleidea.com. So you get maximum value, and to access all the bonuses and gifts, make sure to head to pause.reset.com, register and explore the portal. And if you're looking for great people, check out onesmartnetwork.com. If you've enjoyed the show, do give us a positive review, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Till then, remember you can always choose to pause, stop, reset.